Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest to you to discuss their passions of the fandom nature. Today's guest is the Scarlet Stitch. Scarlet is a cosplayer who is best known for her crochet cosplays. She is self-taught in crochet and brings characters to life in a unique way by crocheting her costumes, mainly drawing on her inspiration from comics, anime, and the movies. How are you doing, Scarlet?
I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to record this episode with me.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
So how would you describe fandom?
I would describe fandom as a sort of extended family in which everybody's very excited about one thing, whether it's a movie or a comic, and it's just a group of people where you get to hang out and talk about something that you know everybody is into.
And what are you into?
Oh, I am into quite a few things, including Marvel comics and the movies, The Walking Dead, anime, definitely, Pokemon video games, and Star Wars, Disney, a lot of things, really.
Right. It's so easy nowadays to kind of find a lot of people interested in the same fandoms as you just because it's become much more mainstream.
Yeah.
It's not like we're hiding in the shadows and trading videotapes or DVDs like we used to.
Nope. Everybody's open, and that's really nice.
It is nice. What do you think is the moment where you first realized you were more than a casual fan of something?
I moved on from casual fan to major fan, I would say, when I made my first cosplay and I went out in cosplay to a meetup outside of just staying at home and taking pictures in it, and I got to talk to people in cosplay, and I think that turned me into a major fan because I realized that there are all these other people who like cosplay and are so comfortable with being in their cosplay with other people and just getting really excited about their fandoms that they're in and just going out there and spending all this time crafting, but not only that, being out in public and open about it. And I definitely think cosplay was what turned me into a hardcore fan.
Awesome, and we'll definitely talk about that. You did mention one of the shows that I really enjoy, and I know a lot of other people that listen to this podcast enjoy, is The Walking Dead. How did you get into The Walking Dead? Was it when it first started airing, you got wind of it and started watching it? Are you a fan of the comics?
I got into The Walking Dead last summer when I was exploring Netflix. I believe Netflix had put it under a section labeled TV shows based on comics or something along those lines, and I was like, oh, I like comics, let me check this out. And it definitely wasn't the type of comic that I had normally read before, so when I was watching the show, I was like, this is very different, this is very dark, but I loved it, and I got into it thanks to Netflix suggesting it, and I got hooked. I watched all of the seasons that were available. I think it was up to season 4 or 5, and I was hooked, and I've been watching it as it airs since then.
Yeah, that's a show that is definitely not for the weak at heart.
No.
You definitely have to go in there kind of knowing even just a little bit, like, you're going to see some stuff on the screen that you probably haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's a big thing about the show is that somehow each season there's always that one zombie kill or something that just breaks boundaries, and you're like, I didn't think that it could get any worse, but somehow they made that even more gruesome.
Absolutely. And I know I've fallen off the Walking Dead train. It's a train I'm going to be jumping back on soon. I've watched up to, I believe, season 3. And I've been keeping up with it online. I read the reviews to see what's been going on and see who the latest fatalities are of the cast. But it is definitely a show that is on par with its source material for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's just great.
It is. It really is. And they've actually released some novels based on it. I haven't read all of them, but I did read, I believe it's called The Road to the Governor. So it's about the character, the governor, and it's just as interesting, I'd have to say, as the TV show itself. And
okay.
I've read some of the comics, not all of them yet. I still have quite a bit to catch up on. But another thing I love about this franchise is that almost every piece of media that they're putting out is just as good. Like, the TV shows are amazing, the comics are amazing, and that one book that I've read is still really good. Like, I was hooked on that too.
Who's your favorite character in the show?
My favorite character, I have two. My first favorite character, I'm going to have to say, is Glenn Rhee. He's just, his transformation throughout the show is so interesting. And my second favorite character kind of goes hand in hand with him, because my second favorite character is Maggie.
Okay.
And I love them individually, and then I love them together. And I think that throughout the show, under the circumstances that they're in, this terrible apocalyptic world where there's just darkness everywhere, they've managed to find their own light in that world and grow into a sense where, yes, they have to be dark and accept that there's going to be lots of violence, lots of pain that they have to experience, but they still manage to have their bright moments. And I think that's something that's truly inspiring.
I love Glenn. Glenn is my favorite character. I've really enjoyed, from what I've seen, his progression as a character. And what caught me off guard is they have the video games, the Walking Dead video game, and you're playing as kind of a prequel. It's at the same time as what's going on in the first season, and one of the characters that you interact with is Glenn.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Before he goes to Atlanta.
Oh.
So it was pretty neat to be like, oh, look, there's Glenn, and oh, he's leaving to go to Atlanta and do all the stuff that you see in the TV show.
Wow.
I'm going to miss him.
Yeah.
I definitely like Maggie. I liked Herschel, and then I also really enjoyed Dale. I was so sad when Dale bit the big one.
Yeah, that was a really hard death, because he was also such an inspiring character. He added so much to their group and that dynamic, and seeing him go was really hard.
Do you have a character who you think maybe is underrated or maybe overlooked by the fandom?
In The Walking Dead, I do think that the fans do a good job of giving love to all the characters. I have to say, I really like Carol, and I feel that some people would overlook her as just a maternal figure for a lot of the show, and she's definitely gotten over that. I think in the fandom, more people are like, whoa, Carol's a badass. That's amazing. Other than that, I think that there really aren't too many underrated characters. People just like all the characters, because all the characters are almost like people you'd see in real life. They're very real feeling characters.
I know that this last season ended in a cliffhanger with, I believe the character's name is Negan or Negan.
Negan, yes.
And that there is a potential death at the start of the next season. Who do you think it is? Because I know who it is in the comic.
Yeah. Well, in the comics, it's my favorite. And I'm in a state of denial, because that scene, it's pretty much confirmed somebody is dead. It was filmed really well, where you'd have to go back and look a million times for clues. I really don't know who it is, but the fact that the actor pretty much said his lines word for how the comic played out, and how that entire season was just pretty much going right on track with where the comics were, it's scaring me. I'm like, okay, I don't want to say that it's Glenn, but if they are going to be true, then it's going to be Glenn. I don't know who I'd want it to be, though. I definitely don't want to lose Glenn, but I can't choose anybody else out of that circle, since throughout the show they've grown. They're a family just as much as Glenn is.
Absolutely. I know after the show aired, a lot of people were really upset, and the actors came out and said that they didn't even film the continuation of that scene to find out who is dead.
Oh my
that
gosh.
It's still up in the air for them as well.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh.
So at least that was the reports that I read on the internet, was they hadn't shot the scene, they still don't know who's dead, and that's going to be something that they'll figure out when they come back for the filming for the next season.
Wow. That's pretty strategic.
Yeah, it is, because, if at some point there would have had to have been a leak somewhere, whether it was a cameraman or an extra, which extras get in trouble a lot nowadays for spilling the beans on different shows.
Yeah.
So besides The Walking Dead, you are a Marvel, I don't want to say fangirl, but you are a Marvel fan.
Yes.
Of both comics and movies.
Yep, I am. I'm pretty much a diehard Marvel fan. I'm sitting in my room right now, and if I look around my room, everywhere is covered in Marvel merch. I love the movies. I love the comics, but it is much easier to keep up with the movies than it is the comics.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so I've just been fangirling really hard about Captain America Civil War recently.
Of course,
and
of course.
I think that they did an excellent job with that. That movie keeps replaying in my head, like, when I'm doing the most mundane things. Like, I'll brush my teeth and I'll be like, that was a good movie.
Absolutely. Not only was it a great Captain America movie, first and foremost, they did a great job balancing all the characters that were in the movie. So it didn't really feel like an Avengers 2.5. It really did feel like a Captain America movie with just the people that were needing to be there, even if it's only for 2, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. They did a great job just balancing those characters, introducing new characters, and just letting it all hang out.
Exactly.
Like, it was a great movie.
Exactly.
I think out of the MCU movies, I always put Winter Soldier as my favorite, but Civil War is definitely second or third.
Yeah, I haven't re-ranked the movies now that Civil War has come out, but I know that it's going to be on my top 5, probably top 3. Winter Soldier is also up there. And then I really like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, I loved Guardians of the Galaxy.
That was a nice change of pace for the MCU when they introduced that one.
It was. I was always a fan of the sci-fi portion of Marvel Comics. I love Nova from... He has his own comic book, but then he was a character in a comic called The New Warriors for a long time. And then they did this galactic story arc where... I think it was called Annihilation or Conquest, where the galaxy was being taken over, and it's Nova, and it's Star-Lord, Rocket, Groot, Gamora. They're all kind of forced to team up to save the galaxy, and that transitioned into the latest Guardians of the Galaxy run with Star-Lord and Gamora, Groot, Drax, Rocket. So I love seeing them on the screen. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was. And then everybody loves Groot. Who doesn't love Groot?
People that don't like trees.
I also feel like Groot turned a lot of people into tree huggers. Like, you walk away from that movie and you're like, I have to save all of the trees now because they have feelings. They are Groot.
That's right. They are Groot. I tried to play, I play a game called Words with Friends, and I tried to play the word Groot because Groot can be a word, and it didn't take it, so I submitted it to Words with Friends to try and make it a word.
That's awesome.
So you love the MCU. Do you have a favorite character in the MCU?
Yes, I love the Scarlet Witch. I mean, I'm the Scarlet Stitch, so I kind of have to. I became the Scarlet Stitch because of my love for the Scarlet Witch, and I like her as a character because for one thing, she's the strongest character that they have going on at the moment, and then she just has such an interesting story. She comes from a place of poverty, of discrimination. In the comics, she and her brother are Jewish, and they have that hard life growing up because of that. And then in the movies, she wants to change the world, and she and her brother are so willing to join their fight and do what they believe in by any means necessary. And she grows a lot when she realizes that Stark isn't the problem. Stark's actually starting to be a solution. And then in Civil War, she has her whole inner conflict with, oh my gosh, people are afraid of me. I'm afraid of me. What is this power that I have? Am I going to be a superhero? Am I going to be able to help people? And by the end of the film, she realizes that she just has to accept that her powers are really hard to control, but she needs to make that effort, and she needs to help people however she can.
Right.
And she's a great character. I love Wanda.
Do you have a preference between comic Wanda and movie Wanda?
I really like comic Wanda, especially in like the grand scheme of her history, and there's a lot more depth to comic Wanda than there is movie Wanda.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to go with comic, although Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff is amazing, and I really couldn't have asked for a better actress.
I like how they made the nod to the comic version with the red jacket.
Yes.
I mean, that's obviously not a costume that is going to appear in the movie universe. It's just not doable. But I like her look in the movies.
I do. I think that's another thing that I'm very happy with all of Marvel costume designers, all of their ability to adapt comic book costumes into believable costumes on the big screen. Because one of my pet peeves with DC is that I find their adaptations of female character costumes just subpar. Because it's not that hard if you look at how Marvel has taken their characters. They're like, okay, Red is a character for the Scarlet Witch that we need to make sure we incorporate, but we don't need to have her wearing next to no clothes. That's not necessary for her as a superhero. And I think they do an excellent job of modernizing their costumes.
Is there a character that you're into that is maybe you'd like to see them get their own movie, or conversely that hasn't shown up in a movie and you'd like to see them in a movie?
I would like to see Kamala Khan as Ms. Marvel in a movie, definitely. And
for those who don't know, Kamala Khan is Miss Marvel in the comics. She's a character that is, I believe she's of Pakistani descent.
Yes.
And she's a teenager dealing with her family and then having to go to school and then having these awesome powers.
Yeah, and I can really relate to her, actually. And when they announced her creation, I was like, okay, this character has the potential to just make such a huge difference in the comic book world. And then after reading the comics, I thought, okay, now she has the potential to make such a difference in the movie world. We want a young female of color to go out there and save the day. That would be so inspiring for so many fans, and it would bring in a lot of kids into the world of Marvel thinking, that can be me. And she would just have a spectacular movie. And it could tie into Captain Marvel.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a character I'd love to see have their own movie. Obviously, they've got their plans for the next 4 years worked out, but they could start laying some groundwork like they've done in previous movies and maybe fit her in or make mention of her and then go from there.
Exactly. And I watched the TV series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and if they find a way to introduce her, she could also very easily fit into that show because they're really going along with this arc of Inhumans, and that's what Kamala Khan is. So she could also end up on one of their TV shows, and I'd be happy with that. I don't think her storyline is quite dark enough to fit into any of the Netflix shows, which are great, but they're all so dark.
Very much so. I know that Cloak and Dagger are getting their own TV show, but I believe it's going to be on the channel that used to be called ABC Family.
Oh.
I think it's called Freeform now, where it's the channel that Pretty Little Liars comes on, for those of you who don't watch that show. But it's going to focus on Cloak and Dagger and their relationship, and they're a pretty old comic book duo. They've been around for a while. They pop up here and there, but it would be nice to get a teen-ish Marvel superhero movie. I know that in the current run that's going on now, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, is part of the Avengers, and she's teamed with, they picked out some really great choices for that team, including the new Nova, Sam, and the new Spider-Man, Miles. They're all on that team. They're all the youngest members of that team, and so they have this trio kind of hangout mentality where they all kind of hang out and work together, and it's just really neat to watch her interact with other superheroes that are her own age.
Oh my gosh, I love teenage superheroes. I mean, as a teenager, I definitely have been drawn to stories just because they feature teenage superheroes. And that actually reminded me, The Young Avengers would be a great movie that I would love to see. The only problem is 2 of those members are the Scarlet Witch's sons, so that movie would have to take place a ways down the road because they're
in a totally different universe or something. I always was hoping, and I know that it got picked up to be possibly a movie, but it never happened, was The Runaways.
Yes, The Runaways, them too. Oh my gosh.
I loved that comic. I really enjoyed it. I loved the whole dynamic with the group between Molly Hayes and Nico Minoru, Gert, the dinosaur, Old Lace, Chase, all of them. I really love their story. It could make for a very fun movie that is geared much younger. I could see them going for a PG rating on that, and even going to get some of that younger audience.
Definitely. I would watch that in a heartbeat.
Me too. It'd just be so much fun to see those characters on the screen. But they have so many characters to choose from. I know they're picking more of the mainstream ones.
Yeah.
Although Guardians of the Galaxy was the one where people were kind of like, out of everybody you're picking to make movies, like that one was the one where it's like, really?
Yeah.
And it just did so well.
It did, so that's proof. They can do what the fans ask for, and other people who may not necessarily be comic book fans will be open to it after seeing the success of Guardians.
Is there another comic book that you're into besides Miss Marvel in the Marvel Universe?
The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Squirrel Girl!
Yes, I love...
Great Lakes Avengers.
Yes, I love her so much.
And now she has her own comic.
Yeah, and the comic is fantastic. It's really lighthearted and fun, and one of my favorite things is that her friend Nancy is very into knitting. I'm like, okay, I know I should be focused on the superhero here, but knitting, it's in this comic. That's amazing.
Yay for knitters represented everywhere.
Yes.
That is awesome. I love Squirrel Girl. I loved her. She never really got the chance. She is in the Great Lakes Avengers comics that were out for a little bit. She showed up all over the place. She used to interact with one of my favorite characters who was in the New Warriors. His name was Speedball.
Yes.
Robbie Baldwin. Now he goes by Penance, if he's still around, because they redid the whole universe. So I don't think I've seen him turn up recently. But it's nice to see Squirrel Girl get some recognition, finally.
Yeah, it's about time.
And speaking of Squirrel Girl, when I was looking for people to invite onto the podcast, I stumbled across this cosplay, this amazing cosplay. I had to check it out. And when I opened it up, it was an entirely crocheted cosplay of Squirrel Girl, and that was you.
Well, thank you. That's very nice. I saw Squirrel Girl, I read her comics, and I immediately knew that I had to cosplay her. I also thought that, wow, of all the cosplays for me to have crocheted, I just feel like this squirrel tail was destined to be crocheted. What better way to make it?
Absolutely. I mean, everyone who's listening, pause the podcast for a second, take a look on the website or our Facebook page, Tales from the Fandom, and look up the Scarlet Stitch's version of Squirrel Girl, and you are going to be amazed at what she has done with this cosplay. The tail is phenomenal, and the whole outfit is too, but that tail is solid. Like, it looks like a fantastic piece of work. Looks just like a squirrel tail. It's got it looks like it's got the heft to it. It's just amazing.
Thank you so much.
How did you get into crocheting?
I began crocheting out of necessity, and I stuck with it because I'm an artist. So I began to crochet because in a Girl Scout project, we were attempting to make supplies for a children's hospital in Sierra Leone, and our option was to sew them until we realized that I could not sew. So somebody came in and taught us how to crochet blankets, and I was like, oh, I can crochet. This is something that I can figure out. I can't learn to sew, so I'm going to crochet all these blankets. And I ended up learning how to crochet. I made 5 baby blankets that were sent over to Sierra Leone. And then I put my hook down thinking, all right, the project's over. I'm not going to crochet anymore. And it was probably less than a year later after the project had been completed that I was sitting in my Latin class being told that our next assignment was to create something inspired by the hero Hercules. And I was just going through all of the 12 labors that we were meant to represent in some way. And Hercules kills this lion, the Nemean lion, and then he wears it around because its pelt is unpenetrable. And I saw the way he put the lion's head over his, and I was like, that could be a cute hat. And wait, I did this thing I crocheted before, maybe I can crochet a hat. So I went home and I figured out how to make a hat, and I made this Nemean lion, hat. And after that, I knew, whoa, I made something. I crocheted something I could wear. I'm going to stick with this and see what else I can crochet that I'll wear. And that was the end of it.
How did you transition from that into the cosplay world with crocheting?
At the time that I was sitting in that class, it was probably around 8th grade, and that was when I was really getting into some of my like hardcore anime fandoms or like Nintendo, and that was when I had discovered cosplay.
Okay.
And I made a scarf as an accessory for one character, and gradually I realized I can crochet much faster than I can sew. I never actually sewed a costume. I would try to alter something and maybe hem it. And it occurred to me that if I just try this, I could crochet something faster than I could alter a piece of clothing. And I think I can do this. So I began to experiment with crocheting clothes. And my first fully crocheted costume was the original Scarlet Witch comic book outfit, because I was like,
okay,
all right, I'll go with this. It's obviously a lot less fabric to work with than most cosplays, so how hard can this be? And I crocheted her leotard, I crocheted her cape, her mask, I crocheted everything, and I wore that one out in public. There was this meetup outside of AwesomeCon trying to break some record for most cosplayers in one spot. We did not come close. But I was out there in my crochet cosplay, and at first I was like, okay, people are going to think this is really weird. Why did I crochet my costume? I was sitting in the car like, all right, maybe I'll just go home. They probably have enough people out there. And my friend dragged me out. She's like, no, you're doing this. And people were really nice about the fact that I crocheted my costume. And it was just really exciting to be like, I did something alternatively, and it still works, and everybody's just excited, because if you're outside in cosplay and they're in cosplay, it's just a fun time. And cosplayers are some of the nicest people I've ever met. So from that moment, I was set on crocheting my costumes, because it was something that I was able to do, and I enjoyed doing, and people were not mean about the fact that I crocheted my costume rather than sew it like I had so ignorantly feared.
I know that I went to my first convention about a month or two ago, and I realized that it didn't matter what your costume looked like, what work you put into it. Everyone was super appreciative of people just being dressed up, just putting the work in for their costume, whether it was something that was just put together, something that maybe have taken days, hours, months of work. Everyone was just super appreciative of people cosplaying. It didn't matter what it was. And I have to imagine, because you get the people, they do the different spins on characters, whether it's like the steampunk versions of characters, or maybe like a 50s version or 60s version of a character, like a throwback type of version. But you're doing it as a crochet rather than the traditional materials has got to be something that is completely different, because I have never seen anything like that when I have been looking around on the internet at cosplays.
Yeah, I've seen some people where they'll crochet an amigurumi, which for those of you who aren't into crochet talk, amigurumi is just a plushie that's been crocheted. So they'll crochet like a prop, either a hat or a scarf, kind of how I started out, and that will be the most crochet that I've seen in a costume.
Right, but not a whole costume being crocheted.
Yeah, and I can understand for a lot of people who don't crochet as much as me. I literally crochet every day. It can be a very time-consuming task. So I would see how if somebody knows how to sew, or if they want to buy their costume, that's another thing. However people want to get their costume or make their costume, just go for it.
Right.
People may not necessarily have the time to do something like crochet their costume, so I don't imagine I'll be seeing many crocheted costumes either, but I have the time because I've found a way to just crochet at all times. Almost.
Right.
Almost.
Are you crocheting now?
I am. I am crocheting now.
Awesome.
I've actually crocheted so much that I have given myself tendinitis.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the reason I got tendinitis from crocheting so much was because I was crocheting with essentially sewing thread that you'd put into a machine, and to crochet with something with thread of a certain size, you need an accompanying hook of a similar size. So the hook I was using was very small, and I didn't think to wrap it in something so that the grip would be larger and it would be ergonomic. So I tried to crochet, 100 strands of 580 stitches to represent my town. I was supposed to crochet a stitch for every person, but I was doing this with sewing thread and a very tiny needle. I had 2 months to do this project, but I was so excited about it that I was like, I'm going to do this in 2 weeks. Wow. By the end of the first week, I couldn't write, and I was noticing in school, I was like, okay, what is happening to my hand? Why is it hurting? And I learned that you can get tendonitis if you don't calm down. And I've learned my lesson. I actually had to go to physical therapy because of my crochet addiction at that point. And I learned stretches to do, and I wear basically arthritis gloves when I crochet.
Okay.
Because they put pressure on your hand and they allow you to crochet longer, and I just do stretches. Kind of, in a way, I think, to the level of some athletes where they just overuse parts of their body where they have to make sure that they're extra careful about keeping maybe their legs or their feet taken care of. And it was just funny to go into the physical therapy room and be like, hi guys, and they'll be like, what are you here for? I got an injury doing some sport. I got an injury like building some giant thing. I was like, I crocheted a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
But I mean, the work that you put out is quality work.
Thank you.
It is not anything to be laughed at or, it is just great. And there's another character that you did, and I thought you did a phenomenal job with her, is Jessica Jones.
Thank you.
And I think for Jessica Jones, it was just her scarf, or was there a little bit more to her?
It was her scarf, and then she had these fingerless gloves.
Right.
And that was it. But I found a way to incorporate crochet.
Well, not only that, but you really look like her too. The pictures that you have on, I believe it's your Facebook page or your Instagram page, you really did like capture her essence.
Thank you. With that character, it was one of the first characters, if not the first characters, that is just not upbeat all the time. She's not a cheery person to be around. Her story is dark, and her attitude matches her story, and I was kind of like, okay, I'm not a grouchy person, so how am I going to get in character? How am I going to take these photos and be sort of grim? And then I binge-watched the show the day it came out, but I was binge-watching it in my costume, because, you know, that's the level of nerdiness I've reached. But it was fun, and it's a comfy costume. And by the end of the day, I'm like, I love this character. And so I was just like, I love this character so much. I'm going to find a way to get in character and just be her because I think she's awesome.
How do you pick who you cosplay?
Ooh. Sometimes I definitely never pick a cosplay just because I like a character design. If I've not played a game or watched something, I always know the material that I cosplay from first. But if I'm playing a game and I may not like the character, but I like their costume, I'll be like, I'm going to cosplay you and just wear your costume and pretend I like you as a character. Or it's with character like Kamala Khan, I saw the announcement that she was coming out and this comic was going to be released, and I saw that pretty much as soon as they announced that blew up on the internet, and I ran out and I was like, okay, I have to do something to show my support for this character because Marvel is doing something right by including representation. And then when her comics came out and her full costume was shown, I saw that. I was like, all right, I love this character. I really just want Marvel to know that I love her and that they need to continue doing stories like this. So in that case, I chose to do Kamala Khan because I wanted just to spread the love of the character. Mm-hmm. And that was along the same lines of Squirrel Girl, where she's a little bit underrated, and I wanted people to know that Squirrel Girl is a character that exists, and she's awesome. So mostly it's because I love the character that I'll choose a costume, but other times it'll be like, that outfit is really cute, or that's a really cool design, and I want to make it.
What's on deck for you coming up as far as your cosplay costumes go? Is there any that you're working on now?
I actually made the Civil War cosplay of the Scarlet Witch, although now I'm completely revamping it because I made that very short notice for the premiere, and I plan on redoing it completely, so full, corseted bodice thing for... I don't even know how she, fights in a corset, but in Civil War, the Scarlet Witch is wearing this cool corset-esque top that I'll be crocheting and adding, the boning to, and, zippers, and trying to just try out my new techniques with different shaping of costumes. And another character I plan on doing, well, characters, I should say, in Pokemon, you have this great Pokemon, Eevee, and then Eevee just evolves into everything. Now, I have done Eevee itself, and I plan to do many more of its evolutions, starting, I think, with the Fire-type Flareon.
Okay.
And I have so many plans. It's crazy to think of, what my next one is going to be. Oh, I do want to make a crochet Captain Phasma from The Force Awakens. I'm really excited.
That would be really interesting.
I'm excited for tackling that because it'll be interesting to get the shaping. I'm probably going to make a base out of craft foam and then crochet on top of it, or make some sort of base with wires. It's exciting because just starting out with crochet, I was like, all right, I'll just do normal clothing and stuff. But progressing as a cosplayer, I'm always I want to challenge myself to see what else I can do with crochet. So I saw Captain Phasma. I'm like, all right. Realistically, watching The Force Awakens, I should have walked out of the theater going, I'm going to cosplay Rey, because I can crochet a scarf thing to wrap around my body. But no, I walked out of that theater thinking, I'm going to cosplay Captain Phasma.
Challenge accepted.
Yes.
That is awesome. I can't wait to follow. I already follow you. And I can't really... I'm excited to see the work that you've put out because just of its uniqueness, and especially with the challenges that you're going to be taking on with some of these characters.
Thank you.
What is a fandom that we haven't talked about, maybe, that you'd like to recommend to people?
Ooh, actually, I recently got into this webcomic called Check Please on Tumblr, and it's this really small fandom that my friend recommended for me. And the webcomic follows this one character, Biddy, which is his hockey nickname because all of the characters are college hockey players. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'm not into sports. I'm not really into hockey that much. It's fun to watch when it's on. So why would I be interested in this webcomic? And it just turned into the most adorable story I've ever seen. So Biddy is this little southern boy who's just really into baking, and he's the tiniest thing, and the rest of the hockey team is these really muscular, tall dudes who are typical hockey players. And Biddy just loves baking pies, and at first you think, how is he going to fit onto the team? Are they going to accept him? And then you see them become a family, and all of the other characters are also really interesting. And I love this because it's very quality content, and you can read all of it on Tumblr. The only problem is we don't have to wait that long for updates. I think the last updates we got were last month, and right now it's June, and the creator was like, just next June will be more updates, and she didn't say specific dates, but the hardest thing is definitely waiting for more content because it's free, and you're like, this is so good. So if you have not read the webcomic, Check Please on Tumblr, that is one that I would highly, highly recommend because it's adorable.
I'm going to have to check it out because I do like hockey.
Cool.
And unfortunately, living in Florida, it's not very well represented on TV except during the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's the easiest time to find it.
Yeah.
And now that that's over, I don't really have hockey again.
Aww.
So, yeah, I'm going to definitely have to check out that webcomic because as someone who has seen hockey players in person, I can definitely attest to their height and their definite, mass to them. They are big, solid people.
Yeah.
And especially when you're standing on ice skates, which gives you the extra 2 or 3 inches, they just tower over everyone.
Yeah,
I will have to check it out.
I haven't actually been to a real hockey game. But after this webcomic, I'm not gonna lie, I'd love to go to one, especially since ice rinks are cooler than most sporting events, so sitting there crocheting a blanket would not make me melt.
And it wouldn't put you out of place. No one would think any different, like, oh, that person's crocheting a blanket. It's cold in here.
Yeah, I'd be totally normal.
Where can people find you if they're looking into your work?
People can find me on multiple social media platforms. I have to say, the two that I am most active on are my Instagram, which is the Scarlet Stitch, that's all one word, and my Twitter, which is at Scarlet_Stitch. And I also have a Facebook page, Scarlet Stitch. Pretty much if you search Scarlet Stitch, it should pop up, but there are just slight variations between whether it has an underscore or it's all one word.
Okay, and everyone, you can find the link on the website and the Facebook page to all of her social media platforms once this episode comes out. And I highly encourage you to take a look at her work because it is amazing. I can't get over it enough. And for those who are out there listening, do you do commission work? And if so, how can they get in contact with you?
I do commission work, yes. I have my own website, www.thescarletstitch.com, and there is a contact page that you can email me through. But I also respond to requests on my Facebook as well. So Facebook and my website would be the best forms of getting in contact and throwing back ideas because, yes, I do commissions.
Well, Scarlet, it has been a great time talking with you today.
Thank you. It's been very fun for me, too. This has been my first podcast.
Well, I'm glad to have you on as you being, like, this podcast being your first. I think that, or at least I hope that the people that are listening will at least check out your work and like you either on Instagram or Facebook and follow your work because it's something that's not out there, and I think what you do is just wonderful for fandom in general.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.